Hey guys, welcome into Contemporary Issue Wednesday. The flannel is back, guys. I know you've been waiting for it. I know you've been saying, hey, when is that flannel coming back? Well, it's back here today because today we're talking about the strategic outlook of Asia. Alright guys, so what we're going to do in this episode is list the different countries, China, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, North Korea. Just go bang, 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 list their objectives, list sort of historical worries that they might have, and we'll move on from there. So it's creating a canvas, an overview for you guys to understand the region, the strategic outlook of the region. So obviously if you're starting in Asia, good place to start is China. China is the dominant power. It was the dominant power for many millennia before now, and it's now having a resurgence in power and prominence in the region. It's now creating the biggest military in the region. It's by far the biggest economy, and importantly, it uses its economic statecraft, its economic interdependence, because it is the largest trading partner with nearly all of the Asian countries, and definitely with all the countries we are going to be mentioning today. And that creates a very powerful incentive for countries to stay on the good side of China. And it's a very powerful tool that China uses in the region. Moving on to Japan. Japan today and historically has been a very strong state, a very strong power both in the region and internationally. It's got a very rich economy, Japan does. That means per capita GDP is the highest in Asia. Although that said, for the past 25, 30 years, Japan has been struggling through a lot of economic problems. On the other side of this, you have a very strong demographic problem where a lot of people are getting older, not as many people have been born, so that's going to create and already is creating a lot of social pressures on Japan. But perhaps the biggest thing that Japan has to reckon with in the region is its troubled history, and particularly I'm talking about World War II. Now, many of you probably know because you're watching this channel, therefore I know you're informed, that Japan had very brutal occupations of different parts of Asia, particularly China, South Korea, Singapore, these types of places. And so that creates very much tension between Japan and these other countries. Now, this is mostly to do with the fact that these countries think that Japan has whitewashed or has just moved beyond its history without fully coming to terms with what Japan actually did to these countries. And that presents a lot of tension in the region, particularly between China, Japan, and South Korea, which was awkward for the United States because Japan and South Korea are the strongest U.S. allies for defense purposes in the region. Moving on to South Korea. South Korea is a middle power, which means it's not a dominant global power, but it is a middle power. It's got a strong economy, a strong basis for support. Probably the most important thing we need to know about South Korea is the American presence on the Korean Peninsula dating back all the way to 1950 because of the Korean War. And so you've got a lot of U.S. forces, a lot of U.S. weaponry and missiles, and even now the THAAD, which is a high-altitude missile defense system put in place. All this is put in place, obviously, to counter the North Korean threat. And so that sort of dominates the U.S.-South Korean alliance. Also, it's important to say that South Korea has very strong trade ties with China and lives under the constant threat of conflict, of war with North Korea. Moving on to North Korea. North Korea is pretty much a pariah state. Its only real contact with the outside world is with states like China, Russia, Pakistan, Iran. Very much a cut-off regime going back decades because of the Kim family who rules over the regime, family rule. Very repressive, very oppressive, and is constantly dealing with famine, with aid problems, with energy problems, and is really dominated by this quest to seek nuclear weapons because it knows if it gets nuclear weapons, it will be the ultimate deterrent for South Korea or the United States to invade North Korea. Moving on to Taiwan. Taiwan was always historically a part of China, but during the Civil War in the 1940s, the Nationalist Party uprooted from China, went to Taiwan, and the communists took over mainland China. And so this is a really, really tense relationship because mainland China, the Communist Party of China, considers Taiwan to be a part of China. And Taiwan itself does not want to be affiliated with the Communist Party, and so they want to push for independence. But if they ever declare independence, China, mainland China, has made it very clear that they will invade Taiwan. And so there's this relationship between mainland China always wanting to get Taiwan back under its subservience as a part of its country, and Taiwan resisting at all costs. Taiwan has a very strong defense relationship with the United States, and so there's tension there between the United States and China because the U.S. backs Taiwan and its effort for independence against China, but at the same time, the U.S. doesn't want Taiwan to overtly declare independence because it's not clear that the U.S. would actually back Taiwan fully if it declared independence. That is, if Taiwan was attacked first without doing anything, the U.S. would back it, but it's not so clear that if Taiwan said, we're going to be independent, that the U.S. would then back Taiwan in making such an assertion. So it creates a lot of tension between the U.S., Taiwan, the U.S. and China, China, Taiwan. It's a very, very tense region. And so the last thing I want to say out of this episode is there's a lot of potential for flashpoints between the U.S. and Japan and China. And these flashpoints take place on the Korean Peninsula, they take place in Taiwan, and then they take place in a region we haven't even really talked about, which is the South and East China Sea. And so China and the United States sort of dominate the Asian geopolitics of the region, but it's important to see where these other countries come into. I hope you guys have a strategic overview. That was my goal. If not, go read some Wikipedia. You can trust Wikipedia. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, share the videos, and remember, reality always trumps ideology.